Hello and welcome to the Franchise Tag Podcast with me, your host, Freddie Hall. I hope you're doing all okay. I have my co-hosts Andrew and Adam join me once again. We haven't been live in a while, but we're back on the scene now. We had a bit of a break, I suppose. We did some pre-recorded ones. We'll give ourselves a little bit of time off. I mean, we've needed time off because it is bloody baking out there in the UK at the minute. It's hot everywhere, but we've got to enjoy the sun while we have it, I suppose. Even though there's hail as well everywhere in the country. What a crazy time we live in, for sure. We're back with the Future of the Franchise series. We're back live once again. We're on to pick number 18, the second pick for the Miami Dolphins. The pick they had earlier on in the draft from the Houston Texans. They picked Jalen Waddle. We're on to their pick now, which they went and picked Jaelan Phillips from Miami University. And we are joined by Ollie Connolly, who is sports and culture writer for The Guardian US. He's also featured on the Nat Coombs podcast as well. Ollie, I hope you're all okay. Not too baking hot, I suppose. You've been enjoying the sun, managed to be able to top up that tan?
Yeah, I think it's the perfect time to be doing some Miami. I felt like today I was getting a real nice sense of the culture, of the vibe of Miami as I sat in Salford in the baking heat. I really got into the mind and the process of why they would select Phillips at 18th.
Well, smashing. I can imagine it's lovely in Salford all the same. Jaelan Phillips, I mean, a very interesting player, a defensive-sided player. Obviously, you picked Jalen Waddle. That was the pick that was really a special pick there. Wide receiver, another weapon for Tua Tagovailoa over there in Miami. But then on this side, you go for the defensive player, Jaelan Phillips, who had a lot of hype before. Well, really, a couple of weeks before the draft. What was your initial reaction as a Miami Dolphin fan when his name was read out? He becomes a Miami Dolphin, and you had another really great piece to that defensive line.
I thought it's an understandable draft pick. I mean, the pass rush was pretty mediocre for most of the season. It improved as the season went along. They didn't do anything in free agency to really address that, so they had to find some kind of oomph off the edge. What they lack mostly is hops. And if he brings anything, he brings some degree of hops and speed at multiple positions, probably in the pros. He didn't actually play that many different positions in college, but I think he'll line up all across the formation once he gets to Miami in the pro. So I think it's interesting. I really think they decided Brian Flores, really creative, crafty defensive mind, just find him a piece. Some of the other pass rushers in the draft were quite one-dimensional, very specific players. They played in wide fronts and they can get after the quarterback. I think Phillips has a little bit more versatility to his game, and they can plug him into a whole bunch of different spots where he might not be an all-pro player or even a perennial Pro Bowl player, but he will help them win and rush the passer from a variety of different spots, which is where they were having issues last year.
What was it that you found most impressive about his time in Florida in college? Because, he did show signs of being a top quality player. So was there anything in particular?
Yeah, he's not like a get off and go, dip and rip. The classic pass rush you think of, Von Miller, Brian Burns, these guys who whip round the edge in that real arcing pass rush that you used to, where the quarterback sits deep in the pocket and here they come dipping underneath the tackle, and can the tackle dip and bend with them? I think people, whenever you see a pass rusher who's like ranked first or second as the edge rusher in the class, you just automatically think, well, that must be what they do, right? They get off the ball really fast and they explode that kind of looping arc round. He's got more, not quite this level of physical dominance, in my opinion, but it's more Jadeveon Clowney-like, where that guy is a straight-on pass rusher. It's all about collapsing, condensing the pocket, and finding creative ways to get him in a straight line to the quarterback. He gets in trouble, Phillips, when it's that dip and that bend. He's just really stiff. He doesn't dip very well. When he's head-on, straight to the quarterback, some kind of stunt, some kind of game, just lining up wider, one of those wide 9 cam weight looks where you can just drill really on the angle. That's when he's at his best. So to me, that's his best skill set. Is he is insanely strong. He has a really good first step. He doesn't know what he's doing once he gets there. He just wants to run through the man. And if you can get him in the right fit, which is, hey, the quarterback's in that direction, just charge at the guy straight up. That is when he's really at his best.
Yeah, he's definitely got NFL size frame, and his athleticism is freaky. But during his time at college, he missed a lot of time. He swapped colleges. And do you think that he'll adapt well into the NFL? And do you think that Brian Flores is the right coach to adapt him into the NFL?
I think Flores is certainly creative enough. You know, you look at the secondary, it's really sophisticated. They run a lot of different stuff. They're not afraid to run one thing one week and completely change it the following week. I mean, when you have a stud secondary, it makes life really easy up front. You can get all kinds of creative, run all sorts of games. And I think if you drafted him and said, well, like you said, he's got prototypical size, speed, quickness, get off. Let's just do an old school Wade Phillips thing where that guy plays that position, go get after the quarterback's son, speak to me in week 16, and I hope you've got 10 sacks. That is just not going to be the way it works. So it's going to have to be, for me, this kind of slow drip feed of he's probably going to be a sub-package guy to start with. He probably isn't an every down player. They don't really need him to be necessarily. If he can just come in second, third down, obvious passing situations, really specific packages, then I think that's how you best use him in this rookie season, where you just say, yeah, can you get us 7 sacks this year in really critical downs? That would be a wonderful rookie season for you. And if anyone's willing to, I think, drip feed it like that, I think it would be Flores.
Yeah, I think Brian Flores is, well, he's doing a fantastic job in Miami as is. I mean, people weren't sure when he joined there, being obviously of the Bill Belichick tree. But he really, the team last year had moved forward just so well with him, with the team under his stewardship. Andrew sort of alluded to it, the fact that he has had injuries, which we'll probably go into more detail momentarily. And also he did sit out 2019 due to the transfer rules of the college football. So he went from UCLA to Miami. So he hasn't had loads of game time, but obviously that could be seen as one weakness. But was there other weaknesses that you found within his game at college?
Yeah, the stiffness and the flexibility is the big thing. He's just really stiff. And I do think one of them, to be fair, I don't know if listeners are aware, I used to be a college football scout. And one of the things with him that I think is, I think this will be a fascinating thing actually for anyone following any team to track 4, 5, 6 years, see where this league is going from kind of a scientific standpoint, and you know what's happening with player development and what have you. So he basically ruptures his ankle apart, right? And now he can't dip. That's really interesting because he was the number 1 high school player in the country, and it was all get off and dip and explosiveness and like, how is this guy able to do this at that size? That has vanished from his game. Now, how much of that is due to the ankle? As you said, Freddie, he sat out a season. He's only had, I think, 1 clean spring practice, which would be that freshman year at UCLA. He had a horrific wipeout on a motorized scooter that basically just decided, I don't want to play football anymore. This is not worth it. This is really painful. I don't want to rehab from this. Had a bunch of concussions. But that ankle injury, I think, really has impacted the dip. So it'll be fascinating to see once he's a professional football player and all you do is think about football, and they have all these new modern athletic training techniques, and they decide, okay, in 4 or 5 years, you have this level of ankle flexion. We're putting you on a program tailor-made to get you to this level of ankle flexion year 3, year 4, year 5. I think that's something fascinating that everyone can watch. Now, are there concerns that will he have the buy-in to do that? That is some of the noise around him. That's some of the reason why maybe he went 18th. Look, this guy retired from football, and almost everyone at this stage is well aware of the concussion issue, and everyone's supportive of players walking away from concussions at this point. But some of the old school scouts are still like, well, if he doesn't love football, is he going to want to turn up to practice? Will he sit out training camps down the line? All that type of stuff. Weaknesses in his game, as I said, it's the stiffness, it's hip stiffness, it's ankle stiffness, and I do think that one of them certainly correlates to the injury.
Based on what you were saying about the injuries that he's had, I mean, do you feel that it is a concern, and almost do you feel like it was a bit of a risky pick because of that? Because obviously, that, like you say, there has been injuries, although it's not something that is gonna, you can go, oh, it's definitely that, and that's a significant problem in his career and for his future. But I mean, do you feel that there was a bit of a risk to this?
I think. I mean, there's risk with any of them. Anyone can get injured at any time. You can be at the foot of a pile and get your ankle rolled over, which is pretty bad. I mean, the scooter one, for instance, such a freak incident. It's not like he's had degenerative knee issues, or at least that we know of. Again, none of us have seen the medical reports. Teams will have full medical files. There may be more of a concern there than we know. The ankle might be degenerative from that initial injury. The thing with him, at least, is he completely remodeled his game and became the player he was last season after that ankle injury when he could no longer bend properly. So it's about not trying to force him to be something he's not until maybe you can kind of nurse that along in the forthcoming seasons. I think even with the concussion concern and the retirement stuff, you can spin that two ways, right? You can either say, well, the guy wanted out of football. That's concerning. If we give him a boatload of cash, by year 3, will he start looking around again? He went to music school. Will he say, well, maybe I want to go make an album now, and I've got all this money. Should I just do that? That's one concern. Or do you say, well, the guy had that. He quit. He kind of hit rock bottom from being the number 1 high school player in the country to a complete flame out in his home state in an era of social media where that is just carnage, as I'm sure anyone can imagine, but still decided to get himself back in, retrained his body, became a different sort of player, and made himself a first-round draft pick. So, if you're the Miami PR team, you're spinning that final story. And if you're a GM elsewhere, when he gets pretty good, you call Adam Schefter and say, yeah, but there's a chance he might quit and play football. He might go and do some music in 2 years,
Yeah, definitely. I think there's been a lot of NFL players in their first couple of years come out and say like they've worried about the concussions and things like that with themselves when they've started looking at like settling down and having families and things like that. So I don't know whether that'd be a concern down the line for him. But like you said, in 2017, he was a 5-star recruit. He was the best player coming in. He had his troubles, but that last year he had at Miami, we saw some glimpses of what he was like when he was a 5-star recruit, and there was started to get a lot of hype behind him going into the draft of him being the best at his position. Do you feel like you were surprised that he fell, or were you did it not make a difference?
No, I think that is probably about his right range. You always get those guys flying up, and the issue with this class is there was no slam dunk pass rush. You probably got everyone would have their personal favorite, and then it's probably a group of 5 to 6 guys. You could reasonably argue probably really 3 should have gone as the first pass rush, and 6 you could reasonably make a case for. So then it becomes personal preference. So no, I think that fits about right. One thing that definitely held him back is his teammate being as good as he was, and him being more of a household name going into the season. He was double teamed constantly, which allowed Phillips to be single teamed all season, and he was playing a pretty terrible slate of right tackles all season. And the tape, in fairness, I'll say this: it's an awful lot of chase down plays. You go through those numbers, and they are quite inflated. Particularly one Florida State game that's really juiced his stats there. A lot of the sacks are chase down stuff. A lot of the sacks are 7-second sacks. That stuff is not happening in the pros. And that's the type of thing that GMs are digging in on is, well, are you giving me this raw production here? As a pass rusher in college, I should just really be able to say wow plays. It sounds really basic, but usually you can just go, pull me up the 15 wow plays of an edge rusher in college. They should be mauling people, even if it's Division II, wherever it is. Khalil Mack at Buffalo, 55 plays, just mauling people. Far too good for the level. Phillips has probably 6, like, oh my God, slam the computer down, run out the room, scream, call your wife, tell her, oh my God, we're getting this kid. It's just a lot of it is effort. It's grinding away. It's chasing down a running back. Like I said, it's someone getting jammed at the line and him coming in from behind. In the NFL, if there's daylight, it's gone. He's not going to be able to have a chance to chase down. There's not going to be 7 seconds of his teammate holding 2 players and crushing the pocket, and then he can bring a long arm around the other side and take them out, particularly not in Miami, where there's just not that level of elite all-pro pass rushers. So for him to go there, I think that kind of 16 downwards feels about right for him, where you're basically gambling. We can refine that player who was the finest player in high school football, maybe in 3 or 4 years' time with the right plan. At minimum, we get a decent sub-package edge rusher, which is what you would take somewhere in that range, because really you want a 3-down player in the first round. So to me, that feels just about right.
Just a personal one off the back of that for me. Do you think he was the right one you took from Miami, or would you have preferred Gregory Russo?
This is quite funny, Ollie, because Andrew loves Gregory Russo. Like he was like, "Oh, Giants should pick him. He's going to go top 4," and it never really happened. But
yeah, I loved Russo the year before. I just don't think he quite has the get off and go to necessity. I don't think he'll be a 3-down player. So then if he's not a 3-down player, what is he for you? And that's a real difficulty, because he is supposed to be an all-down, every-down mauler in the kind of Joey Bosa vein, where on first down, he's happy to take 2 guys on and rip into the backfield, and then we can kick him inside on 3rd down and Michael Bennett and get after the quarterback from inside. And I just don't quite think that neither the production nor the top end elite talent is there. And he's kind of stuck in that middle ground of maybe he can grind out for you. So if you're going to take one, it is really as simple as, how much do I fear for my job? Do I take the safe guy, or do I bet on the guy who, if we're already in trouble as an organization, the owner's firing me next season because I took the guy who wants to go do music? Like that's kind of the situation there for me. I would have gambled on Phillips just for the pure higher athletic upside.
Sorry, Andrew, you lost again, mate.
The NFL will prove.
I had him mock draft to go to Buffalo. I thought, and I didn't even think he would be in the first round. I only had him mocked to go Buffalo because he was at the draft night. And I figured, I feel like in these times, they're not going to have all these kids turn up and then they're not going to get drafted in the first round. NFL must know that these guys are going in the first round somewhere. They must have heard it at some point. So, good prediction from me, I suppose. Given your history with being NFL scout, Ollie, and I'm sure maybe I'm bloating this up to more than it is actually, but do you think due to Phillips going to Miami, I know he was at UCLA, then transferred to Miami, does that have any bearing with NFL teams like Miami Dolphins? He's got the link. People in Miami, in Florida will have heard of him. They, if they support the U, they're going to be invested in him. They know some people like him, some people maybe dislike him. But does that with NFL organizations have any bearing when they're looking at these players?
Not the geography does not come into it in terms of what you're saying there with a fan base. Good organizations, I should say. The Browns have been known to take Ohio State guys later in the draft because, that does help ticket sales and stuff. And I do get that. And maybe you get, if you had, for instance, the Heisman winning trophy quarterback in your area and you don't take him, you're silly. No one's going to fire you for doing that because everyone would have done it anyway. So, if you're just doing pure job preservation, you do that one in a heartbeat, because if he's good somewhere else, then you're definitely getting fired. But for your pass rusher, that's not happening. Where it plays a role, an awful lot of teams, they'll have, and I'm sure you'll have seen this related to when there's a scandal, everyone has their fixer, normally a former FBI guy, and he kind of does the background checks for you and stuff. If you're in the same town, that makes it really easy. You know all the bouncers, you know all the club men, you know all the people. You can go and ask around the town. If there's any kind of off-the-field character stuff, you just have a better inroad. Same with the local coaching staff. You will have done some kind of coaching clinic together. You probably have some kind of communication back and forth. You probably meet up for beers to talk about how crap your OC is, something like that, when you're line coaches. That can have a bearing because you can just get in there closer. You can go to a practice that afternoon. You can, if you got people on your tab sheet that you want to go check out, you can go into the weight room and talk to people in a way that others couldn't throughout the season as higher up members of the organization rather than just the area scout. So in terms of background checking and finding out personality, and you would maybe get a heads up from someone about maybe give this guy a pass, either someone locally not related to the football program or someone within the football program, which in this situation, as we were saying before, about injuries and overcoming them, and the fear of him retiring, you would have to think they would have a better inside track on that makeup from being in the vicinity and being able to talk to people that are probably more trusted than would normally be. If you were just ringing up the guidance counselor from Buffalo, for instance, you might get a glowing report no matter what, whereas that might not happen if you have a long-standing relationship. Because someone in the front office, someone who's been a Dolphins lifer that's been there 17 years, will know someone at the U who will give them a true report, as opposed to, we're all just going through the motions. Yeah, he's a great guy. So that is, I think, how it's run. Good organizations would never just draft someone for geography. Tom Brady came from, San Francisco to Michigan to New England. He did the whole span of the country and won everything the whole way along. You just find good players and they'll make them local heroes. It does not matter. And I do think Chris Greer, though he gets some flack, and particularly Brian Flores, they just ooze competency. So I can't imagine they would ever allow someone like that to seep into the organization.
Just finally on Jaelan Phillips, do you feel that it was important for the team to go defensive on their second first-round pick? Because, the AFC East is getting better and better, and obviously Buffalo are a force now, and the Patriots have got a lot of players back and brought in some good players. So do you feel that it was important that they went defensive?
You're forgetting Zach Wilson as well, Adam. Number one QB there, man.
Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't say there's an identity there of electric passing attacks. I mean, you need them anyway. If you need anything, you need a pass rush, and they haven't got them. I mean, I do think Ogba can be good, but I mean, he's not an every down difference maker. Not that necessarily Phillips will be, but that's what you're kind of hoping for. They needed some kind of pass rush help, and they didn't go for any in free agency, which was a bit alarming. They didn't even go for a Melvin Ingram this week and say, oh, let's just give him $5 million. He knows what he's doing. Maybe you can show some of the other lads what we do. So that's interesting. I mean, they very much believe, and it's not purely because of Brian Flores, who was a former defensive backs coach before he became the head coach, that you build backwards to the front. They believe that philosophically in terms of schematics, because you can't change coverage really to impact the offense from the snap, but you can change your front and present a load of different odd fronts and really mess up protections that way. So you can kind of scheme things a bit more with the pass rush to create pressure, whereas you just need good players in the secondary to be able to cover ground, to cover players. So I think they went so all in on the secondary that they're kind of chasing the tail this off-season, being like, we need some guys up front now. We got through it one year. Now we need a little bit more spice. And they went and took whoever they thought was the best guy with that second pick. I mean, you couldn't have taken one of them with that first. I'm sure they would have loved to have had someone sitting up there for them with the first pick, but that top 12 are so loaded with players on the offensive side of the ball. You may as well just wait. Whichever one falls into your lap, you just take one, hope for the best.
Do you think with how quick Brian Flores has turned that team around and the season that he had last year, do you think there's massive pressure on Miami to really perform this year with the pieces they've added and come out and actually qualify for the playoffs this year?
I think it's the complete other way, if I'm honest. I feel like Flores has been so good. He's so charismatic. And he forced me to write a column last year, which I never thought I'd do, which was I started to believe in the idea of buy-in, which I've just never. I always think a lot of that is just complete rah-rah nonsense. Most of it is just who has the best players, who has the best scheme, which coach is able to marry the best players to the best scheme to hide how bad his scheme is or to make his players look really good. That's the name of the game, and who has the best quarterback. Seeing him get that level of taking all these cast-offs that he'd worked with in other places and kind of thread them into this perfect scheme-based situation, and hearing how people talk about him and how just creative and smart he is on the field and how great he is on game day, I think he's already put himself into a level where he's in coach of the year conversations, and he's actually bought himself time where if they are bad this year, it will be purely Tua Tagovailoa. No one else will lose their job. No one else will get any blame. They will get some blame, obviously, for the decision to not take Herbert and to take Tua. That's going to be a bad one. But they've proven to be so good with an experienced veteran quarterback that they'll get a complete do-over, which is either go and find another veteran one or go and take another shot in the draft. The brain trust, both Greer and Flores. So I still think, I'm sure they feel some kind of pressure because you're supposed to take this linear developmental thing, right, where you get close and you get in, then you knock on the door and so on. I just don't quite think the league works that way now. It's like if you have a good quarterback, you're going to make the playoffs. They don't know if they have a good one yet. Could be good, could be bad, could be average. We're all kind of waiting to find out.
What's your opinion? Yeah, I think we're about to say the same thing, aren't we? What's your opinion on it? Because I think he's getting a bad rep too early. Personally, I really, a lot of people are really negative about Tua at the end of last year, and I never thought he was going to be transformational straight away. And the circumstances obviously very strange. They had Ryan Fitzpatrick. He was doing really well. They dropped him for Tua. Everyone was a bit like, why are you dropping him? He's doing really well. But, that time was going to run out. Fitzmagic is good for the first 5 games, and then it does all tail off. And it was very wise of Flores to then move on. And they were in a good position. They'd won some games, lost some games as well. But what's your stance on that?
It's tough because I've been such a fan dating back to high school and then into college that to see him in the pros, and the thing that struck me immediately was, wow, he looks really small. And he was always small-ish in college, and he was surrounded by giants. That offensive line averaged 6'6" in his year. That was massive. Both tackles were 6'7". It was freakishly tall. And he looked just about tall enough and thick enough to be good enough at Alabama. And then when he got to the pros and he got dogpiled the first time, I was like, oh, he looks really small, and he is not evading anyone. He was never a straight line runner. He's more like this wiggly, run around in the pocket, find a throwing lane, get rid of it type guy. But even then, those little angles you can craft and create, the Russell Wilson, like give myself an extra split second to bend my body so I can flip it outside. That was really difficult. So that's a real concern. I do think you're right. The strange circumstance for me is the hip injury. I think the most under-discussed thing, because it is so boring, is how much the hip impacts quarterback play. Quarterback play is entirely from the hips. You'll hear constantly people who, one, don't know what they're talking about, or two, want to try and know what they're talking about, is you'll hear them say footwork. And they'll say stuff like marry footwork to the pass pattern and all that. And that is true in a West Coast system that they're married up and there's timings and what have you. But the reason we have this boom of Mahomes, Allen, going back to Rodgers, Wilson, is because none of those guys even throw with their feet planted half the time. They are throwing from their hip. It is about rotating the hip over. It's a snap. It's all explosion from the hip. Aaron Rodgers actually commissioned a study, figured this out. It's pretty interesting. Tua, the exact same way. You go back to Alabama, and you'll have really weird things where his feet are planted completely parallel to the sideline, and he's throwing to the side. And the torque he's putting through his hip to do that is unbelievable. And he's really ripping the ball. He's not got a cannon of an arm, but he's ripping it enough to hit a guy, those fast guys we all know, in stride, and it's housed 60 yards. Because the backside cornerback is like, well, there's no way he's throwing this ball. So I'll just, sag off for a bit, and boom, it's gone. To have that violent a hip injury, I think it's going to take a long, long time to recover. You'd have to spend a year rehabbing it, more time relearning the movement patterns, more time doing it all without pain. And if it is in pain, which none of us know, which we can only speculate on, then I've got to find another way now to try and operate around this. So I'm giving him that complete year do-over because I do think he was bad, and it was worse than even the defenders would like to say because of that hip equation. He was such a hip-based thrower that you've got to give him a chance to either have had another year of therapy or to have at least learn some kind of way around it and become more of a drive from the back foot type guy, which can be done. Tom Brady did that transition. It can happen, but it takes time, and young quarterbacks aren't blessed with a whole lot of that.
What do you feel about their running back room? Because they grew quite a little bit of criticism for the fact that they didn't draft one quite high up. I mean, they've got, Myles Gaskin, Malcolm Brown they brought in, but there's not a lot of strength of depth there. And they, like I say, they did draw some criticism. So do you think it's going to be strong enough for them to be able to push for a playoff spot?
Yeah, I that wouldn't be my primary concern. I think you look at the way they're building the team and how they've stacked up kind of short, fast receivers. It would be about getting the ball out early and having that be the running game. Essentially, the screen game becomes your run game, which is a thing people hate to hear because for the most part, it really does not work. PFF did an interesting study on this, actually. It's one of the wonderful coach isms. It becomes the extension of the run game, and then you realize that it's actually really bad because you're just allowing them to see where the ball is going for a full second so then they can reset the defense over where the screen is, as opposed to a running back who can see a hole and then fire it and run off. Gaskin's super explosive, and then Brown is the thumper. So I understand people probably want an all-world, all-around tailback still. I don't know if that's a fantasy thing or what have you, or just people who've grown up with the game and they're like, well, you got to have a great running back. Running backs are at this point almost irrelevant. You'll find a guy in week 6 you can pick up. He'll give you 200 yards one week. You move on to the next guy in week 7. I think that it's nothing that would prevent them, I don't think, from making the playoffs. If their run game is bad, it's because defenses aren't respecting Tua's ability to pull the ball on the play fake, and that is a catastrophic concern that is really long term as opposed to just making the playoffs.
Well, if they get Le'Veon Bell in, Le'Veon Bell, rapper, Jaelan Phillips, music man. That could be a hot album cover there, both of them in a Miami jersey.
He did spend a long time down there a while ago, didn't he? He was jet skiing, he was partying. I think that FBI fixer guy I was talking about earlier, I'm sure he would be knocking on the front office door to be like, look, guys, I don't think this one is in our best interests.
As a Steeler fan, I would be knocking on the door as well, going, it is not in your best interest to do this. just to go back on the draft, actually, just for a moment, because I was going to ask this, but then we deep dived into Miami as a team. You knowing what you know about these college players and everything like that, who would you have picked with that pick?
God, you've caught me on the spot there. I'm trying to remember who was on the board. Feels like forever ago.
I know. Tell me about it. It feels April. God, it does feel like ages ago now, doesn't it? It was weird.
I remember
it's only 15 players were gone, so you have the whole of college football to choose from.
Well, I'd have taken a lineman. An offensive lineman, not a defensive lineman. Leatherwood was the one who went right after. I don't like Leatherwood.
Leatherwood was before you, and Christian Darrisaw was still on the board.
Yeah.
Who else? It's the more interior lineman.
It's weird because in terms of just raw players, Eichenberg, who they took, who I think, did they call him as a tackle? He played tackle at Notre Dame.
I believe they drafted him as a tackle. I think he was called tackle on the night.
I think he's going to play inside in the league. Eventually, they'll probably throw him out there for a preseason game to explain to him and his agent that he stinks out there, so he's going to have to go inside. That's a classic one. Waste the whole preseason with the guy in the wrong position just to tell his agent, look, it's not working. So that player I'd have taken there, but for some reason, I mean, it's not some reason. I understand the efficiencies of the league, the pay structure. You want to get bang for buck. An edge rusher, you know, is just a better investment than an interior lineman. But I would have just took that guy at 18 and been really happy with my night if I got him on Waddle. So to get the three of them is, you know, one is a complete swing from the hip. Let's hope for the best in Phillips. So yeah, there's an answer for you.
I think Kwity Paye was still on the board, wasn't he? If you went for the same position, I thought
yeah,
he was a more-rounded player.
Yeah, more rounded and more of the all around as you're alluding to as I was talking about earlier, that ability to both get around and go through if you want to. I still think Phillips has a little bit of the better first step. He's a quite a weird player. He plays really upright and he's quicker on the stunt, so you have the set man, and then you have the guy who loops him behind, and really he should be the looper. He comes off the edge, loops him behind, smashes through the middle. I don't know whether this was a Manny Diaz weird system thing or he just didn't know what he was doing, but he would just torpedo off right through, straight through the middle. Was not waiting for any set man or any of that nonsense. Get your schemes out of here, and he would just torpedo through the middle. So yeah, he's quite a weird player, which to your point about earlier about why he went to 18th. I'm sure they was looking to like, I don't even know what to do with this guy. Fascinating player. But yeah, Kwity Paye, as you said, if I was taking edge rusher, if it was decreed by the GM, we're taking edge rusher, that's the guy I would have gone for. Probably just more of a safer all-around bet.
Well, it's been a really great chat with you, Ollie. Really appreciate you coming on, my man. Where can we find you on social media and also your articles with Guardian US and things like that, my man?
Yeah, all just the name, Ollie Connolly, double L, double N, double L. You can search that. I gotta be honest, man. I don't know about you guys. I'm thinking I'm out of the social media game at this point. I think I'm just gonna let the columns do the talking this season. I just find social media to be so. I mean, I'll obviously plug this show. Great show. You know, people should follow me so I can then show them the show. But just football, NFL discourse at this point is become a viper's nest. I think it's easier to just let the columns do the talking. So go to theguardian.com. There you go. And then you can go read my thoughts.
Smashing. Well, that means, Adam, you've got to carry on doing your articles that you do for all the other places, because they're going to be even more important now, mate. Not that you had pressures before, you're going to need more pressure now. Again, Ollie, really appreciate coming on. Props for the t-shirt as well. Rose Apothecary for all you Schitt's Creek fans out there. Great show. You should watch that as well. Watch it before the NFL season starts. It's coming up very soon, the NFL season. What is it, like 50 days now? 50 days until we go? Man, it's coming fast and thick. Preseason's going to be soon. We're going to be doing more of these Future of the Franchise series. We're going to be starting the real show, I suppose, the proper show, about a couple of weeks before the season starts. Lots of exciting things coming from the Franchise Tag podcast. Again, thank you for joining us live. Thank you for all the support as well. It's been really great. And we'll see you all again very soon.